My point is that there's this whole other side of parenting that is not often discussed when parenting comes up. And that is parenting as a place of weakness designed by God to deliver us to this 2 Corinthians 12 experience of desperation where we truly learn what strength is as biblically defined. Parenting is a place of weakness where we are hammered and hurt, where we learn desperation, where we experience at times irrational fears, daily pressure, anxiety like Paul in verse 28, and dark nights of the soul. And God breaks us down until the certainty that we once had in methodology lies tattered at our feet, and He alone stands supreme, because we're not investing our faith in our methodology. We're not investing our confidence on how we do things, but they are being replaced slowly over time with the supreme majesty of God and His Son, Jesus Christ. In other words, we arrive at weakness. See, weakness is a place of power because it imposes the need for faith. That's where that intersection is. That's what God's getting at. It's in that place of weakness where faith is required. Parenting is weakness because it teaches us to trust God. I mentioned earlier that if you were to ask me one thing I would do differently, I could certainly talk plenty about methodological differences, methodological changes that we would make in the way that we approached parenting. But if there's one thing fundamentally that I would want to do differently, it's this. I would want to trust God more. I like to get things done. I'm kind of wired that way. One thing I learned is that kids are not a get-it-done kind of project. It's not like you just sow now and you reap immediately. This is not a soda machine where you just pop in the coin and the soda comes out as a result. The product emerges simply because you've done something. And for me, when I sow and I don't reap, I tend to fall into unbelief. And I can be deluged by these thoughts of, by now you should have been. By now you should have been here. By now you should have been more effective. By now they should have been here or there. And I just got into this whole parenting thing, not realizing that my child's seeming, quote, unquote, lack of progress, my child's seeming lack of progress was the very place where I would encounter God. Which is why Paul is ultimately able to say in chapter 12, verse 10, for the sake of Christ then, I am content with weaknesses. That's where I want to end up. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I've made this observation before, but you may not have heard it, but I've noticed that in families with multiple kids, God often gives a child, maybe more than one, but at least a child, that is more inclined towards God, almost from birth, almost like they were born that way. And you'll have these wonderful experiences, perhaps, where you go home and, Dad, I was reading God's Word today, and it was so fresh and alive, and it was so inspiring, and God spoke to me in so many wonderful ways, and I was going to tell you all about it, but I decided rather to just write this paper and communicate my love for God and for you in this paper. Here you go. And yet God is also faithful to give you other kids that will beat that child up and take you to places of desperation that you never thought you would go in parenting. Because the reality is that compliant child, thank God for that compliant child inspires gratitude towards God, but that difficult child will teach you weakness and will help you to learn how to boast in the right things. We're crying, God, why won't you change them? And God says, I will, but I'm going to change you first. I've got them in my crosshairs, but I'm doing a work in you first. And so let me now introduce you to your tutor for weakness. It's the one that just ran up the stairs screaming and slammed the door shut up in their bedroom. In fact, I want you to follow them up, knock on their door, go into their room, sit on their bed, and I'm going to teach you about the gospel. Because I'm going to require you to love them right where they are. I'm going to ask you to incarnate yourself into their environment, meet them right where they are, love those who persecute you, pray for those who abuse you. If you don't understand them completely, jump in, get involved, and display the glory of the gospel before them in that very context.